paying attention to the Haftorah. I know that this is the time during the service when many people catch up on their more internal meditations. Not pointing fingers at anyone. So, who were we fighting in the Haftorah? Gog, right? Gog. So we were fighting Gog. Great. Who's Gog? He's a guy, you know, he lived down the street. So this is not just a hypothetical question, and before we leap into the metaphorical answer, you should understand that for many thousands of years, people very much believed that Gog would be a real person from the land of Magog, from that territory. And in fact, if you go back through times, one of the more interesting things you can do, if you like geography, is to look at old maps prior to modern cartographical surveys and such, and there would always be on these old maps of the world spots for Magog, spots for that country, because there needs to be, in order for there to be a country that will have a guy named Gog that will come attack Israel at the end of days, and everything will then fall into place. This became a bit of a problem in the 16, 17, and 1800s as more and more of those maps of the world got filled in, and the blank places that you could just write in things you were making up disappeared. There's no room left for Magog. There is no hidden country somewhere that could be for Magog or Prester John or any of the other fanciful places that used to be littered around the maps of the world. So Magog is not a place. So who's Gog? Well, Rabbi Samuel Raphael Hirsch said, in order to understand who is Gog, we have to understand why are we reading this for Sukkot. And that will give us our portal into it. So he says, why are we reading about the battle of Gog from Magog at the time of Sukkot? So surely it is a tale of redemption, it is a tale of final victory of good versus evil, it is a tale of the end of days coming, and through this portal of conflict, we will be ushered into the era of everlasting peace. Great, he says, but you know what? There are a lot of passages throughout the Nevi'im, throughout the prophets, that tell that same story without this guy, without Gog. It's kind of strange that we would focus on this passage of all the passages of redemption in order to be the message that we are reading on Shabbat of Chol HaMoed Sukkot. Yes, Natan? If you've got a suggestion, please go ahead. I know Rabbi Samuel Raphael Hirsch's answer, but I'd love to hear yours too. Let me make sure everyone heard that. So Sukkot is, you may not quite recognize it from the basic liturgy, is the most universal of the different festivals that we celebrate. Pesach is very focused on the exodus from Egypt, Shavuot very focused on the giving of Torah, but Sukkot, by the way that we do our sacrifices, it works out that we are giving sacrifices on behalf of all the nations of the world, and therefore it is envisioning that the whole world will join in this celebration, this recognition of God and of each other, and that will bring peace. So therefore, this story seems very fitting, but that still doesn't explain why we have to mention Gog. So again, in the other readings for Sukkot and throughout the tales of King Solomon, in the building of the temple, Sukkot figured prominently in the dedication of the Beit HaMikdash, the temple of Jerusalem. And therefore, again, the temple as a symbol of the peace among ourselves, peace for the world, it is very appropriate that that which would be established during the time of this battle would also be mentioned. But again, we've got lots of other Nevi'im that talk about those themes that don't mention a fight with a guy named Gog. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Right, Sukkot, the happiest festival in the calendar, especially if you're a farmer. Absolutely right. Sukkot was not a given. It was something that needed to be, especially as we are entering the Shemitah year this year, a reminder of our duty to the land, a duty to each other, that we were not supposed to take the bounty for granted, that this was something that we had to reflect upon. Indeed, one of the reasons why we read from the book of Ecclesiastes at this time, as well as I mentioned last night, how it is a counterpoint to the celebration of Yom Kippur, is precisely because we need that spiritual reflection, not merely the material satisfaction. And that goes together, but we're still missing Gog, right? We've got pages and chapters of other prophets, all of them, that talk about these themes. None of them mention Gog the way we do during this Haftarah. Right? So hold on. So there, we're on the right track. There you are in your fragile sukkah, and you are looking up at the sky through your what? Skach. Right now, why can I not see the sky when I look up? What's above me? Be'ivrit, what's above me? Right? Skach is what we have for a covering in the sukkah. On a regular building, what do we call the part that goes over the top? The Gog. Oh! Oh! Gog is the Gog. Gog is the Gog guy. Gog is the roof guy. And Sukkot is the Schach time. And the roof and the Schach are enemies. All right, so now we have to work on what Rabbi Samuel Raphael Hirsch is doing with all of this. What's wrong with a roof? Right? As someone who grew up in a house that had a very leaky flat roof, I like roofs. I like roofs when they work. I don't like schach. So all right, the arrogance theme is exactly right. Everything in Sukkot is about the antidote to arrogance. Because this is the time of year with the harvest, with our success, with everything that we've accomplished through our year's worth of labor to bring in that harvest, when you are most likely to get really, really proud of yourself. That's the roof mentality, says Rabbi Samuel Raphael Hirsch. He says that is the roof mentality. The roof mentality says, I can protect myself from the weather. I can do it. I can build a roof and I will never get wet again in my life. I will never get cold again in my life. I will never get too hot again in my life. I've got my roof. I've got my house. I've got my air conditioning. I've got my comfortable mattress. I can protect myself perfectly. Right? If you want to make your life better, you take steps to make sure your life will be better. You build better, smarter, stronger. This is the way of the world. And that's not entirely a bad thing. But there is a potential, there is a danger, there is a seed planted within this type of thinking that says, well, if I can do it better, then eventually look at how much better I did it. And I'm feeling rather confident, in fact, maybe even overconfident, which is what we call arrogant. And when I feel arrogant in my ability, my strength, my power, my control, to overcome any problem in life, then that means I can also overcome the consequences of my bad choices in life. The worst problem of arrogance is not just that you have trouble getting through doorways because of your swollen head. It is because you think you are impervious to any of the consequences of your bad choices. Right? The arrogant person thinks, I don't need to follow the speed limit. If I get a ticket, so what? I'm rich. I can pay it. Right? It's not a fine. That's like a toll road for the wealthy. Right? I can go 150 miles an hour and I'll just pay it. And if they take my license away, I'll just get a chauffeur. Fine. Big deal. I can afford it. That is the imperviousness of Gog. That is the imperviousness of thinking that the roof is what matters. That if you build the best roof, you can do whatever you want because that will keep you safe. There will be no consequences. And Gog represents those who looked at the weak, those who looked at the good, and said, you know what? Let me tell you what Thucydides said. Thucydides said, the strong do what they want, the weak do what they must. And we are the strong, you're the weak, so just pardon us while we step all over you. And Sukkot comes along to say, no, that's not the way it works. Not just because it's wrong and immoral and unrighteous, it's all of those things, but because it's also unwise. It also doesn't work like that. There's a problem with this Gog type of thinking, which is not that we shouldn't build roofs. Of course we should. The Torah tells us all the time to take actions to provide food for ourselves, to provide protection for ourselves and our families, to help others in need. We are always being told to roll up our sleeves and get to work. It's not like Judaism says, everything is in the hands of God, just sit back and let God take care of it. No, quite the contrary. Judaism says you do 90% and God does 10. But even when you do the 90, you have to realize that you're still in a sukkah. Your sukkah may look beautiful. Your life may look like it is impervious. It may look like you have got everything covered. You've got insurance for this, you've got insurance for that, you've made preparations for this, you're all good. But really, you're still in the sukkah. You're still in a fragile dwelling. And at any moment, something may happen that you did not anticipate potentially happening. And it's going to catch you off guard if you're on Gog's team. If you're on the Sukkah team, then you were ready for that because you knew that your world, your life was permeable, that it could be overturned in an instant. That doesn't mean you're ready and willing to accept it, but it means that when it happens, you will have a backup plan. You will have a backup community. You will have backup preparations to prepare for the unpreparable. When we sit in that sukkah and we recognize the fragility of our life, we recognize the permeability of our world, that all of our best efforts and protections still can be overturned by random events and things that are impossible for us to anticipate or even completely protect ourselves from, then we recognize that, one, we should treasure what we do have, and two, that we should make contingency plans. And recognize that if it does get flipped over, if it does get torn down, if it does get flooded, we will have a way to cope. We don't know what it is yet, because no one can predict everything, and no one can prepare for everything. That's the roof mentality. But we'll get by. We'll find a way. Because ultimately what is important is what you can put in that sukkah, and the only thing you can really put in the sukkah are other people. Everything else can get ruined, but people, no, not so much. If something goes wrong, we'll get through it together. If the sukkah gets torn down, we'll build a new one. A person who relies entirely on their power, their strength, their arrogance, their roof, their Gog, their Gog, they will be undone whenever their preparations are circumvented. The random event that they could not have anticipated or refused to admit was even a possibility, it will unman them. They will be left bereft, unable to face any of the consequences. Those of us who know we're in a sukkah, comfortable though it may be, will get by. Power goes out, we'll live. Hole in the roof, we'll manage. Place burns down, okay. Is everyone okay? Good, then we'll find a new place. This is the lesson that Sukkot tells us. You don't defeat life, you don't win the game of life by being the biggest, baddest, strongest person around, because life is always going to be able to be bigger, badder, and stronger than you. You win it by recognizing that together you can fix anything that happens. Shabbat Shalom and Moedim L'Simcha.